Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It's customary in the Islamic tradition, when commencing any book of any science, to learn something of the author, and it's always worthwhile gaining an insight into who the author is. One of the unique aspects of studying books in the Islamic tradition, particularly the classic books, is that not only were most of the authors experts in their field, but they were people of the highest spiritual ranks. What this means is that the end result of the work is more than just an academic textbook or manual, but rather every word in these books carry the lofty intent and spiritual blessings of its author. And because of this, every student and teacher who reads it with a sincere purpose shares in the blessings. Studying the life of the author not only adds to one's own appreciation of individual figures in Islamic history and Islamic scholarship, but it also gives one a deeper sense of connection with the work about to be read and learnt. When we know who the author is, we may imagine ourselves sitting at the feet of these great luminaries. While physically we are unable to do so, these books, having been taught from teacher to student and so on, century after century, become the intermediary connection and link between the student, who may be 100 years down the line, and the original author. The author themselves learnt from their teachers, who learnt from their teachers, and all the way up to the companions and to the Prophet ﷺ. In this way, a chain of knowledge is formed between the Prophet ﷺ and the author, and thereafter each student. This is what is known as isnad. So why study this book, Ar-Risaalah Al-Jaami'ah? Ar-Risaalah may seem like a very basic text to many and eager students of sacred law, keen to dive into the deeper, perhaps even marginal, details of fiqh. However, this book has a very special place in the Shafi fiqh curriculum. One reason being that it is clear and concise for the beginner, providing the most important aspects one really needs to know to make their worship valid. The other reason is that, unlike most books of fiqh, Ar-Risaalah combines both the outer and inner dimensions of worship. Given that it is mainly a primer for the books that usually ensue in a traditional curriculum, what it offers the students is not only a sound foundation of fiqh to build upon later, but it directs the student's attention to the proper inward state and sound intention one should strive for when worshipping Allah, which is ultimately the whole purpose of studying and practicing the Sharia, and indeed the purpose of man's existence. It's common to find many advanced students who have never studied Ar-Risaalah to go back and read the text under a teacher, purely for the blessings. The author's name is Al-Habib Ahmad bin Zayn al-Habashi. The title Al-Habib, meaning the beloved, is an affectionate title used for scholars of Hadramaut in southern Yemen that are descendants from the Husseini branch of the prophetic household. It's equivalent to other titles used for the Ahlul Bayt, particularly scholars such as As-Sayyid, used in Sham, the Hijaz and the Indo-Pak region, As-Sharif, also used in the Hijaz and parts of Africa, and Tangal, used in Kerala in southern India. One may assume from the family's name, Al-Habashi, that the family traced back their roots to what would have been known as Abyssinia, perhaps through delegations settling in Arab lands or traders, as is often the case. Habib Ahmad was born in 1069 Hijri, 1659 Common Era, in the small town of Ghurfa in Hadramaut. From a very young age, young Ahmad sought sacred learning. He memorized the Quran from local scholars of his town as well as other sciences, though the town was limited as to what it could offer the young seeker. And so he travelled to Say'un, a city about 30 minutes from Tarim, and then to Tarim itself. During this time his only sustenance was dates, of which Tarim had plenty. Tarim used to be called Tarim al-Ghanna, meaning Tarim the abundant and self-sufficient, because the land was fertile and produced the needs of its people, and the people lived very simply. Until only 70 years ago, the people of Tarim lived on dates and occasionally meat, and 50 years ago on dates and rice, courtesy of Indonesian visitors and traders. It was in Tarim that Habib Ahmad studied under the great scholars of the famous city until he had exhausted all the scholars and knowledge available there, and finally attached himself exclusively to one particular scholar, Imam Abdullah al-Haddad, the great scholar and mystic of the time. He continued to serve and study under Imam Abdullah for 40 years, and Imam Abdullah once said of him, "He was the learned ascetic who was sent to me." He studied countless books under Imam Abdullah, and it was during one of these lessons, whilst reading the Muwatta of Imam Malik, that Imam Abdullah al-Haddad passed away. Habib Ahmad's devotion to seeking knowledge encompassed both the inner and outward sciences, and he mastered a great many of both Islamic and secular disciplines. This is confirmed in his 25-volume Ar-Risaalah Al-Jaami'ah, which covers a range of topics and sciences ranging from law, theology, Quranic exegesis, hadith, to mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and engineering. It is documented that he once looked at about 100 books around him and said, "Were all these books to be destroyed, I would reproduce them from my heart." In regards his methods of teaching and elucidation, he was described as having the gift of brevity and the facility of easy exposition, equally understood by the brilliant of mind and the slow of wit. When he expounded on spiritual realities, it was as though he had the ocean at the tip of his tongue, and when he ventured into fine subtleties, it was as if he was picking roses. Habib Ahmad was in continuous worship and remembrance of God. He was well known for his austere living and spiritual devotion. His student al-Habib Muhammad Zayn bin Sumait said, "We sat with him for many years, but I never heard him mentioning the world nor inclined to its people. He used to look at its people with a lack of appreciation, and to the renouncers of the world and people of contentment with high regard and veneration. In addition, he used to undertake enormous religious activities like renewing sacred sites, zawiyas, constructing mosques in different parts of the country, mosques which are still there now and in active use. He used to spend large amounts of money on them, seeking thereby to be near to Allah and upholding the word of the Exalted. By no means shall ye attain righteousness unless ye give freely of what ye love." His main dhikr or remembrance was the words of Tawheed, La ilaha illallah. Imam al-Haddad himself attested to Habib Ahmad's spiritual rank as being amongst the highest of the sanctified saints. Habib Ahmad finally settled in Houta, a very small town approximately 40 minutes drive from Tarim. Here he continued to teach and receive guests and students until his last breath on this earth. Habib Ahmad passed on to his Lord in 1145 Hijri, 1730 Common Era, and was buried in a room adjacent to the family house. To this day, people make a special trip to visit his grave, receive blessings and make dua. And anyone who has visited his maqam will attest to the serenity and sense of blessing that is present there. We ask Allah to have mercy on Habib Ahmad bin Zayn and to reward him for every letter read in the Risala by every student who reads it and every teacher who explains it. And we ask Allah alone for tawfiq and blessings in our current reading of this book. And with this, we begin our reading of the text.